Hey everybody, so I wanted to talk to you today about when you should go about getting your child tested. And when I say getting your child tested, I am talking about two different things, right? So when it comes to getting your child tested, that could simply mean just getting them some type of screening to assess for their development, or it could mean more of a formal assessment where you are getting your child evaluated to see if they may have some type of diagnosis of some sort, such as a speech delay or sensory processing disorder or autism or things of that nature. So basically, when you start to take those steps to go and get your child tested, just to kind of see what's going on with your child, the point and the goal of it is just to see what areas your child may need some extra assistance in and how much support and what type of support could best benefit your child. So the first major clue that your child may need some type of evaluation is if you notice that your child is having extremely difficult times getting through their daily routines or self-care tasks. If you've noticed that your child has a very hard time dressing or brushing their teeth or sitting for meals or even engaging in mealtime, these are all part of a child's day-to-day routines. Of course, every child kind of engages and develops at their own pace when it comes to these routines. But if you're noticed that your child is having some significant issues with kind of getting through these day-to-day routines, then that may be worth you taking them in to get a second and a closer look. To go along with your child having difficulty with engaging and participating in their daily routines, another sign that you may need to get your child tested is if they're having really hard times with transitioning from one routine to the next. So if they have a really hard time with transitioning from, let's say, playtime to nap time or bath time to bedtime, whenever it's time to move from one thing to the next, it's like an extreme meltdown, extreme tantrum, that is a sign that maybe your child is having some social emotional issues and they may be ready to get tested just to see if there's anything significant going on there. Another common clue that your child may need further testing is if you notice that your child isn't really engaging with others. Maybe your child isn't really engaging with you or with their peers or with their family members. Maybe your child seems very withdrawn and isolated. Maybe they have limited or no eye contact or limited or no type of communication. Maybe when they're around other peers their age, instead of them playing side by side by them or engaging with them, they kind of withdraw and are more self-isolated. If you started to notice that your child has some of these decreased social skills and not as many social interactions with others, then this may also be another clue that you should go ahead and get your child screened or tested. Another clue to watch for that may indicate that your child needs some additional testing or screening is if you notice that your child is starting to engage in some repetitive behaviors. So repetitive behaviors could be things such as your child constantly lining things up and they only line things up in that particular order, and if you come in and you manipulate or change anything, it leads to a significant meltdown. Now, I will caveat that by saying just because your child likes to line things up, it does not mean there's something wrong or that there is some type of developmental delay or anything like that. Some kids, that's just a part of their play. But if you notice that it's impacting their ability to expand on their play, or they get really upset and have huge meltdowns if something is off a little bit or change, then that may be a clue to you to, hey, maybe there's something else going on here, or maybe I want to get a second look. Another repetitive behavior that you may observe are what's known as stimming movements, right? So if you notice that your child is constantly rocking back and forth, or your child is constantly hand flapping, or your child is constantly spinning in circles, or you notice that your child is intensely staring out the corner of their eye, these are signs that maybe your child is engaging in some self-stimming behaviors, and this may be a sign that you want to go ahead and get your child at least screened to see what's going on there. Also, it's important to note that when it comes to some of those self-stimming behaviors, 9 times out of 10, there's nothing wrong with that. A lot of times children just engage in those behaviors because it's a way that they're self-soothing, and it's a way that it kind of helps them be more calm and regulated. But if you notice that these type of behaviors are actually starting to interfere with their day-to-day activities, interfere with their daily routines, or even if they become unsafe for themselves or unsafe to others, that's when you may want to take a further look into it. And another sign that you may want to get your child tested or at least screened if you notice that your child has really strong reactions to different sensory experiences. So that could look like every time your child gets their hands dirty, they have a meltdown. If your child cannot tolerate wearing different types of clothing, maybe things when they go into a new environment, it's so overwhelming and it causes them to melt down. Maybe they can't be around loud noises, or maybe they're kind of like on the opposite end where they're always seeking more input. So they're constantly on the go. It's hard for them to focus. It's hard for them to sit still. They are constantly bumping into things, crashing into things, seeking loud noises. It's like they want more and more and more sensory input. So if you've noticed that your child is either seeking a lot of sensory input or they are very sensitive to sensory input, that is another sign that you may want to go ahead and get your child screened or evaluated. Another clue that may lead you to getting your child tested or screened is if you notice that they have some really hard challenges with that emotional regulation. So this means that your child often has a hard time with calming down, and you notice that your child has very frequent and intense meltdowns or tantrums. Another thing that you may notice is that your child has a really hard time with managing their emotions, and it may lead to aggressive behaviors. So if you notice that your child hits or throws or kicks or bites or bangs their head when they don't get their way or when they are overwhelmed, this could be another sign that your child may be having some issues with that emotional regulation piece and could lead you into getting them further tested or assessed. So although there could be more signs that you should go ahead and get your child tested, these are some very common, like in your face signs that may lead you to thinking like, hey, what's going on with my child? I'm very concerned and I think I should go ahead and get them tested, but I'm not sure. So if you've noticed any of those signs that I have talked about earlier in this video, then go ahead and get your child screened or tested, especially if it's in your gut to do so, because I always say and recommend that you trust your gut. So if you feel like something's up or something's wrong, never be afraid to go ahead and get them tested or get them screened. And so how do you go about doing that? So number one, go ahead and talk to your pediatrician. Tell your pediatrician or your medical professional that works with your child what things you are noticing, how it's impacting them, how it's disrupting their day-to-day, and then they can refer you out to the necessary services, right? So sometimes they may refer you out to early intervention if your child is 3 and under. Sometimes they may refer you out to a specific type of therapy, such as occupational therapy, speech therapy, physical therapy, behavioral therapy. So definitely talk with your pediatrician. But a little bit of caveat for that too, if you do talk to your pediatrician and they're just not seeing what you're seeing, but you still feel it in your gut that, no, I really think that something's off, never be afraid to get a second opinion. Also, it's important to note that if your child is 3 and under, in most states, and double check with your state, but usually in early intervention, it doesn't necessarily require a referral for your pediatrician. As the parent, you can go ahead and contact your state's early intervention program and get your child evaluated or screened without even having that doctor referral initially. So remember, getting your child tested is not necessarily about getting them labeled or making sure they have a diagnosis. It's really about understanding their development, understanding where they are so you can meet them where they are, and so that you can learn about what supports and what resources are going to be best to help your child make progress. Remember, if you're on the fence about going to get your child tested and you're kind of going back and forth about it, I say go ahead and do it, because it's better to rule things out. It's better to find out things early so you can get the ball rolling and get them the resources and the supports that they need as early as possible. You don't want to delay and you don't want to wait for too long, because that's just longer time that your child could have been getting the services that they're now being delayed from having. So if you have any further questions about this topic, make sure you drop them in the comments below. And also, if you're interested in learning more so about the different types of stimming or repetitive behaviors that children may exhibit, make sure you watch this next video.